The tractor's loaded with the stakes, nets and a bundle of spars, ready to go whenever time is right. "200 yards or maybe a bit more of net, and just enough stakes to put those nets on. And there's a float with a name on, just to identify the net. When anyone comes across it, they know whose it is. Here, setting out the stakes, or pricking out as it was called, and this could be quite critical if one was out on a flat sandbank. It could be absolutely flat. The shape of the net had to be formed so as it faced the flukes as they retreated back to sea. Here we're going through a stream, so the fish will almost certainly lie in the lowest spot. Not too critical, but this is the way it goes. To get the stakes to go into the sand, one has to start with a wide movement of working the stake into the sand. If we start off with a short movement, it will go down perhaps a foot and then stop. Start off with a good wide movement from side to side or forward and back, and decreasing it will automatically decrease as one gets down. And this is where the mel comes in. To knock the stake as I shake it, and it firms it up. It becomes like the concrete layer uses a vibrator to get out all the air out of the concrete. So we do this with the sand. And the stake rapidly becomes very firm when one knocks it in with the mel. Without that, the stakes will come out. With strong wind or rushing tide, the stake will float out. In such cases as this, where the sand is hard and dry and it's difficult to get the stakes in, we use an iron bar, and that's what I'm doing there. A great iron crowbar. Get that well down into the sand, pull it out of the sand, and quite quickly put the stake into that hole. And again the mel. Now starting to hang the nets on round the small turnpike at this end, the westerly end, fastened both top and bottom round this little rectangle. Get the cord well down into the sand where the bottom cord is fixed. Probably dig it down a couple of inches down into the sand so as the fish can't get underneath at that point. Now notice the little hitch that I make there to keep that top cord tight while I get to the next one. Progressing on, and now just putting the top cord round the stake for 7 or 8, probably 7 stakes.
Believe it or not, I did all this by just sticking the camera on a tripod and carrying on. Probably should have had somebody with me that could film it properly, but that's what I did.
From this point I'm starting to make a small arc in the net, turning more to our left as we look at it, or heading slightly north because we're looking east at that point. And this will proceed for probably 30 yards or so, and then a slight increase on that arc, slightly more to our left.
Yeah.
So there. Spare and the cord in one hand like that. See? Spare and the cord like that. Just making sure now that the bottom cord at the top and bottom is well down into the sand. I probably put it down about 1 inch or maybe 2 inches down into the sand.
About every 7 or 8 stakes, both cords are wrapped round the stake, at the bottom and at the top, so that when the tide comes in, the net cannot go over the top. It could lift up, and as the tide goes out, the bottom cord could go over the top. The top and bottom stops that. In a lot of this, I'm going quite slowly for the benefit of the camera, but men that were used to it can put these spars in and hang the net on almost as fast as you can walk.
At this point, where there should be a top and bottom, it's in the middle of the stream, and in a day or two there could be a very fast tide coming up here, where if I were to fasten the net both at the top and the bottom, the tide would simply push out the stake. Where the spars are in, the net is able to lift and offers little resistance to the incoming tide. But here I'm putting in, instead of a top and bottom, a tie back. I fasten a short piece of rope to the middle of the bottom cord there, between 2 stakes, and then run the ends to the stakes at either side, which acts just same as a top and bottom, but it does allow the cord to lift to a certain degree. So there, it can lift as far as that, but the 2 cords going either way stop it from going over the top, in the same way that a top and bottom would do, but doesn't restrict the net so much. And there's a top and bottom. That one's got the spar in, and that one's fastened at the top and bottom, and it's called a top and bottom. And the net is actually made up of 30-yard lengths and fastened together, so you can extend it or take pieces off and then simply laced together. The ends of the cords tied, and then the net simply laced up. And there's the knot in the cord to prove it. And these are in 30-yard lengths, which I started doing probably in the 1970s. Before that, they were always 20-yard lengths. And here I've made what we used to call a willy wood leg, and don't ask me why, because I have no idea. I'm coming along here and I just make a little angle there which just baffles the fish, and they may continue on that way to the turnpike or little maze in the end. But now we're coming up to the end, and there is the little turnpike, a little maze in the end of the net, that the fish come along here, they're heading towards this end, they'll get into there, wangle their way around that little quadrangle, and then they'll land back into the net and go back to the centre of the net in that direction. And now the net is set and waiting for the tide to come in. And here it is coming up now, up the channel. And it is quite a low tide, so not coming very fast, but fine for our purpose. We can see how the thing happens and how the net lifts. The spars are starting to lift as the tide comes in. The bottom of the net is lifting up and the spars are becoming to a more horizontal position. We're getting quite a swift flow coming through now. You can probably see that the water is now about 18 inches deep, and I'm standing in the middle of it. If it were a higher tide, I wouldn't be able to do that. We would have to have been gone before the tide came. It's about 7:15 in the evening now. The tide's been in and gone out, and we'll come back to see what we've caught. Certainly caught quite a lot of small jellyfish. I think these are called moon jellyfish, and they've no great sting with them. They have a sort of an irritation if you get them down tender spots like the insides of the arms, on the face, but it is a mild sort of tingling, nothing severe. A couple of flukes, flounders there, and the mullet, which is about 4 pounds in weight. That fluke's still breathing. Its gills are moving. And another mullet, a bit smaller, 2.5 pounds probably. At this point it doesn't appear that there is a great lot of flukes. There are some. I expected to catch probably about 200 pounds, but most of them will be in the small stream, so there's time yet. What there are good flukes, mostly £1 to £1.5 in weight. And there is a lion's mane jellyfish, which gives a very nasty sting. It has sort of slimy, trailing tentacle-like things which do sting. The moon jellyfish have these 4 circular marks on top, and through the probably 1950s, 60s and 70s there were tremendous quantities of them. I mean millions. There came times when you couldn't set nets at all for them. They were just full. Now there are quite a lot of flukes swimming around in this water, which is never going to dry out, so they may swim up and down it all night. Well, when it's not required for the net to catch, we simply take out the little sticks or spars, pick up the bottom cord and hang it over the top of the top cord on the stake. Pick up the bottom cord like such, place it over the top, and now the net is said to be hung up. The little sticks out, and where there's a top and bottom, simply slide the bottom cord up to the top one. And that fluke, flapping itself into the sand to become invisible, hopefully, known as dorking or dorking. And there's the lion mane with its nasty streamers coming up, hanging in the net. Now, if I were to come and move this net and have to load it up onto the tractor, I could shake that out, shake the jellyfish out, but those bits of slimy string would be still in there, and they would sting me, certainly on the hands and arms, and then if you rub the face at all, then the face hurts, like being badly stung by nettles or whatever, and it lasts for several hours. So that's the lion's mane. There are quite a lot of big flukes in this water, as I said before, and there's one. We can just see the eyes and the mouth, and it's quite a big fluke. It weighs about £1.5 pounds. I have in the past caught flukes at 2¼ pounds in weight, but that's the heaviest I've ever caught, 2¼ . Now the idea with this net, called a baulk net, is to baulk the fish, prevent them going back down to the sea and down to the deeper channels. They've been out feeding up on these sands, and if this stream wasn't here, they would just mostly lie in front of the net, not necessarily in it, All you do have to do is walk along and pick them up from the sand. And here's a good example of a fish just ducked in, flapped itself into the sand, and there it is just showing.
Yeah, I made the mistake of setting the net through this water, which I thought would have practically dried out, but it is 2 or 3 inches too deep. Difficult to pick up the fish.
They're coming down to the net, seeing it and turning back. If this stream wasn't here, they'd just be lying in front of it, and probably maybe 150 flukes or something like that are just swimming up and down this small stream.
And now I'm going to try to catch some in the water, but it's quite difficult in that depth of water, about 6 or 8 inches deep. If it were a couple of inches, a different thing, but they go rather rapidly through that water. I can certainly catch those that are pretty near to the edge and fairly shallow, but after that, not so easy. If I were to wait another couple of hours, the water level would go down and they would congregate and be much easier to catch. I'm picking up the flukes with a little 3-pronged instrument called a cram, which was really for picking up cockles, but it was used for picking up flukes. My father and his contemporaries could pick them up very fast. They'd done it all their lives. The cockle basket, made by the swillers or basket makers up around Haverthwaite, Backbarrow and Lowick, it held 40 pound of flukes. That was the measure. When picking up cockles, the basket again was the measuring instrument. 3 baskets went into a bag, just about 100 weight. They were never weighed, it was always the measure. 3 baskets to a bag. But the basket and cram was used by everyone. All the fishermen used these until perhaps the 1970s, when people started to pick cockles into small hand nets.
Docking itself in now to become almost invisible. Still the eyes showing and the mouth. Not happy yet, want to be further down.
I got a man to make this basket about, I suppose, 10 years ago, when really cockle basket making had finished. But he made it rather too big. Instead of holding 40 pounds, it holds about 50. So I've got that basket full. I've also got about the same amount in a box. So I've probably picked up about 90 pounds, and there's almost certainly the same amount still left in the water. And here's a small mullet coming, waddling down. Instead of being trapped in the net like the others, it's been swimming freely, and it's gone straight through the net. It's probably about 2 to 3 pounds in weight, gone straight through the net. The water gets a little shallower down there, so it'll probably be stranded in the end. Well, there's a good example of the lion's mane, which I've shaken out of the net, but all the nasty slime is still on the net. So if one came to pick that up, it would be down your arms and perhaps on the face, especially if you came to shake all these other jellyfish out. And there are good numbers of them. If they'd been twice as big, which they will be in another month, they could have been a real nuisance.
So that's the Baulk net. We've seen it set, we've seen it catch some fish. It may never be used, almost certainly will never be used again commercially. There are so many easier methods these days.
Not happy yet, want to be further down.
I got a man to make this basket about, I suppose, 10 years ago, when really cockle basket making had finished. But he made it rather too big. Instead of holding 40 pounds, it holds about 50. So I've got that basket full. I've also got about the same amount in a box. So I've probably picked up about 90 pounds, and there's almost certainly the same amount still left in the water. And here's a small mullet coming waddling down. Instead of being trapped in the net like the others, it's been swimming freely. And it's gone straight through the net. It's probably about 2 to 3 pounds in weight, gone straight through the net. The water gets a little shallower down there, so it'll probably be stranded in the end.
Well, there's a good example of the lion's mane, which I've shaken out of the net, but all the nasty slime is still on the net. So if one came to pick that up, it would be down your arms and perhaps on the face, especially if you came to shake all these other jellyfish out. And there are good numbers of them. If they'd been twice as big, which they will be in another month, they could have been a real nuisance.
So that's the Baulk net. We've seen it set, we've seen it catch some fish. It may never be used, almost certainly will never be used again commercially. There are so many easier methods these days.